Hi, beautiful souls. It's Tan back here again today with you, continuing our series on Sun through the houses, and we're going to be going through the 5th to the 8th house today. So I would highly recommend that if you're not familiar with what the sun is and what the houses are in astrology, that you check out the first video that I made. I'll leave a link to that in the description box below, where I am explaining my interpretation of the sun, as well as what it means when the sun is going through a house and how you can find your birth chart online. And then come back and watch this video. And of course, keeping in mind that as you're watching this video, when we're talking about sun through the houses, this is just one part of your birth chart that you always have to consider aspects being made to the sun to see how that might change what I say here. Of course, if you love astrology and you want to go deeper into astrology, human design, and the gene keys, do join me and the community on my Patreon, where I post videos about aspects in the birth chart and synastry and composite charts and gene keys, programming partners, as well as gene keys spheres and going through each of the lines in each of the gene key spheres. So these are some of the series that we're currently doing right now. So I'm going to post a link to my Patreon in the description box below as well. So see you there. All right, so we're going to go now and we're going to talk about sun in the 5th house. So I'm going to talk about this partly from theory, but also from my experience of knowing people that have this placement and having clients that have this placement. So people with sun in the 5th house, if you have this, you are somebody that I would love to hang out with, because there's usually something very dynamic about you. There's usually a very generous nature about you and a very easy to get along with, funny people, have sun in the 5th house. You also will tend to be very athletic and being into all kinds of risky sports and activities and maybe even gambling, and things like, paragliding and maybe some extreme winter sports and things like that. So you get the idea. You kind of push the limits and test the limits on your body. And remember, the sun is representing our ego structure and what makes us feel confident. So to be able to use your body in a way where you're testing its limits, to know that you can do this, to kind of prove yourself that you can do these things with your body, is something that is really going to bring you a solid sense of pride, because the sun does rule out pride, but it doesn't have to be negative pride. It can be a good form of pride of building your confidence, right? When you have sun in the 5th house, you, like I said, can be very charming. You have a sassiness about you, kind of like most Leos. They can be a little bit sassy in that sense. You can be the life of a party when you're there. Oh my God, I cannot tell you. I actually knew somebody who had sun in the 5th house, but also Jupiter in the 5th house. And he was like a dancer, and he was always the life of the party. People just love being around him. Now that I think about it, this person came into my mind as I'm talking about this. And just like a really nice, genuine person to be with. And yeah, really, this person was like I said, like a dancer. So they have this sassiness about them. They have this playfulness, but also sexiness mixed together. So it becomes sassiness. That's a kind of tends to be the expression of people with sun in the 5th house. So some of the more negative traits or challenges with people with sun in the 5th house is, and this is not to say that everybody who has sun in the 5th house may be this way, but there are two things. So the first is, because they're so playful and lighthearted, it can be really hard for them to be serious. They may be there for you when you're having a good time, but they may not be there for you when you are struggling with something. They will understand, they're generous by nature, so they'll understand that you need them during those hard times, but it may be hard for them to be in that state of true understanding with your darkness and your struggles. They'll have their own darkness and their own struggles, but when they're with you, they just want you to have a good time most of the time. And they really, sometimes they feel like they just generally don't really have the energy for that. They have more of a restless energy where they just got to keep going, they got to dance, they got to do stuff, right? Now, the other negative of having sun in the 5th house here, this is a bit more of a challenging thing, is that you may be subconsciously, like if you're not working with this yet, doing things in your life to seek recognition because your inner child is wounded. Because the sun can also kind of burn. The sun is really hot, right? So it can kind of burn the house, the things of that house. And the fifth house rules children and inner child. So there's something about you when you were growing up, your inner child was lost. Maybe you had to grow up really quickly. Maybe you had to take care of a parent, or you watched your parent not being able to enjoy or have fun with life because they're so concerned about practical matters, and you understood this, and so you somehow are seeking a recognition from a parental figure or from the world by overachieving. Yes, I do know that some Sun and Fifth House people can be overachievers. And I think that that can be channeled into something really great if you are enjoying what you do and you are not doing it because you're seeking recognition. You've done the inner child work. You know what part of your childhood was sort of compromised, and you know how to make time in your day. Maybe it's your hobbies, maybe it's creative projects that you do, and maybe your hobbies or creative projects becomes your career. But just having that awareness, just knowing that this is the child part of you, and this is the adult part of you. And being able to maybe select and choose or be aware of when you're using either one is really important. Because what I've noticed with Sun in the Fifth House people, it's also like sometimes you're hoping that in that moment they can be an adult with you and have like an adult conversation, but they're not. Or sometimes you're really, it's really time to just enjoy life and have fun, but they're down or they're gloomy and they're moody and they're just not up for it. There can be that imbalance there. So finding that balance, coming to that awareness about your inner child healing is going to be really important with Sun in the Fifth House. Of course, like I mentioned, especially aspects in your birth chart can change this, especially Saturn aspects. So if you want to dive deeper into aspects in the birth chart, then join me and the community on our Patreon page. I'll leave a link in the description box below. I would love to have you there. We are going to be doing a series on aspects in the birth chart, synastry and composite, gene keys series as well. So Sun in the sixth house. I immediately think of a friend of mine that has this one when I talk about this. So I'm going to be talking about this to you from both theory and also life experience of knowing people that have this placement. When you have Sun in the sixth house, you are going to be somebody that has some level of routine and a busyness about you. That's what I've noticed. Like when I want to meet a friend that has Sun in the sixth house, I may not be there in her calendar. Like I would have to book a couple of weeks in advance because she's got stuff that she's got to do. And she's got routines that she consistently does, and health is very, very important to you if you have this Sun placement. Please take care of your health, because some people with this placement are going to be very good at taking care of their health, right? They're going to be like nutritionists or like health coaches, or just into medicine and can really take care. I'm talking about like alternative forms of medicine, like holistic medicine, right? That's kind of where we want to go to. So they can be like really good at that. But some people with Sun in the sixth house are struggling. And this, the sun's going to light up this house. So whatever it is that you decide to do in your life, your health is going to be highlighted, mental, emotional, and physical. So if you are, working very hard in your career, you are going to face some kind of physical illness that's going to come up. Maybe you're going to have a back pain, or maybe you will not be digesting food correctly, or, whatever it is. Like the health issues, your health is very sensitive. So it's going to be highlighted in all the activities that you do in your life, but specifically in your career, because the sun, like I said, it represents the ideal to which we strive. It can represent our career path. It's our life's work in the gene keys, right? So with that, that's going to show up. And if you're ignoring that, it will catch up with you the older you get. So if you know that maybe taking a walk in nature is really good for your health, do it. If you know that you need to go to the gym regularly, that's really good for you to move and to take care of your health, do it. If you need to be seeing a therapist regularly to check in with your emotional health, mental health, do it. Right? Take care and prioritize your health. And with the sun in this placement, some astrologers will say that you would do best in a career that has to do with service or that is a little bit mundane. I don't think that that is entirely accurate because, again, you have to look at the whole birth chart. You could have other planets in the 10th house, maybe the first house, and you're highly ambitious, right? But you have your sun here. So what I do tend to notice if you are, this second case is that there could be something that's sixth house related that is holding you back, or that is asking for you to multitask, because the sixth house is ruled by Virgo, and that's Mercury. And Mercury is all about multitasking. So, for example, you could be very ambitious in your career, and I've seen this a lot of the times, is that you may have a parental figure or somebody that you know, and could be the father, because the sun represents the father, that is physically ill. And so you may have to take care of that father figure and balance that out with pursuing your own ambitions and your own dreams in your life. Whatever it is that, observe your father, what he didn't do well when it comes to his health, you can change that, and you need to be changing that so that you are changing it for yourself and for future generations as well. And sometimes what I've seen is this theme around sacrifice that happens with people with sun in the sixth house. So I have a friend, and this friend, her father got sick, but yet she had to do something very important in her career. But instead, she chose to be there for her father instead of this really big breakthrough that she was having in her career, right? So it could be that kind of situation where at one point in your life, you have to sacrifice your own ambitions because there is someone or some situation that needs you to serve them. So that could also be happening. And one last thing that I want to mention about sun, this house is also that you are also very picky and can be a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to how you use your energy. And I think that this is really important and can be really, really good if you are a projector or a manifestor or a reflector in human design. This can make you very wise when it comes to how you're going to expend your energy. As you can have sun in other houses 12th house or something, and you're just not sure if you're overusing your physical energy, or maybe sun in the first house and you're a projector and stuff, and you're not sure, it can make it harder for you to really know how you're using your energy. But with this sun placement, it makes it so that you are going to be wiser about how you can conserve your energy, and then when you have the energy, and how you're going to use the energy when you have that energy. And of course, there's a bit of a perfectionist tendency here, but I think that is, a wiser sun in the sixth house person is going to understand perfectionism and is going to be able to let that go, and is going to be able to take criticism when it comes to them. But a lower energy sun in sixth house person is perfectionist towards themselves, critical towards themselves, but also to other people. You can, I've experienced in my past living with somebody who had sun in sixth house, and they were just very perfectionist in the home, and nothing I did in the house was clean enough, or was cleaned the right way, or was cooked the right way. They have a very specific way of eating even, right? And it can be very hard to live with that. So making sure, and I've seen wiser sun in sixth house people as well that are much easier to live with, that are much more communication is really important. And having an open communication about your boundaries and other people's boundaries as well is so important, because if you're not understanding other people's boundaries, you can criticize people and it can really damage your relationships. So I think that's going to be my take on sun in sixth house. And of course, like I said, other things in the chart can change this, especially aspects. If you want to go deeper into aspects in your birth chart, then join me and our community on our Patreon page, where I make a series going through all of the aspects in the birth chart, as well as synastry and composite charts. And we're going through each of the lines in the Gene Keys spheres, as well as Gene Keys programming partners. There's a lot coming up. So I'll leave a link in the description box below, and I'll see you there. Sun in the 7th house. This is a placement where when I meet someone with sun in 7th house, they are so charming. These are some of the most charming people you'll ever meet, is people with sun in the 7th house, especially if you're meeting them and you're having a conversation with them one-on-one. So when you have Sun in the seventh house, your ego structure and your sense of self-confidence is coming through when you have is being built when you are able to have relationships with another. But I do want to say that it's a bit of a tricky placement to have the Sun coming through, because having a relationship with another person, so just being in a relationship, doesn't necessarily mean that you're in a happy or healthy relationship. Therefore, I want to change this phrase, and I want to say that a solid sense of ego and self-confidence for you is going to be built when you are able to be in a harmonious and healthy relationship, not just any relationship. So with Sun in the seventh house, like I said, you're very charming, you're a very people person, especially one-to-one relationships. It's really easy for people to like you. A lot of maybe sources out there will say that Sun in the seventh house can be people pleasers. I want to say that that is kind of partially true, but it's not a people pleaser like Venus in the seventh house. That is more people pleasing in the typical way. Sun in the seventh house people can be people pleasers, but more in a sun-like way, like a Leo-like way. When your sense of self, you're the sun, right? When your identity, your self-confidence is really wrapped up in another, it makes it so hard to let somebody go. It makes it so hard to end any relationships when you have this Sun placement. And so because you don't want relationships to end, you can turn out to be the person that is pleasing through control. So this is a very subtle form of control. In other words, we can say manipulation. So we're getting into the negative parts of having Sun in seventh house now, which can be manipulative. For example, you are doing what somebody in a relationship wants, so you're pleasing them, but only because you want something in return. So we have the Venus people pleasing, which is like, I just want to be liked. And the only thing you need to give me in return is being liked, right? And it tends to be a more easier and light type of people pleasing. But with the Sun, it can hurt. It can be like, I'll do what you want, but you have to do what I want in return. And if not, I'm going to give off a bit of a scary aura. That's kind of a Leo type of people pleasing. They can, if you don't do what they want, they can then turn, well, we're going to use the word narcissistic here, not to say that this is not what I mean. I don't mean that Sun in seventh house are narcissistic or even Leos are narcissistic, but I use the word narcissistic because there is I am in charge of the relationship. There's an assumption of authority, yes, in a relationship, one-to-one committed relationships of all types. That can be like a romantic relationship, that can also be like a business partnership or friendships, as long as you're committed to them in a sense. There can be this superiority that comes up, right? So that's kind of where I was trying to get to with this one. So it's really important if you have Sun in the seventh house that you are, I would say, develop a sense of self before you get into a relationship with another. And be in relationships, like close, intimate relationships with many people. Don't cling to and hold on to one relationship for a really, really long time. Like if you're in your 20s and you have Sun in seventh house and you've been in like a 10-year relationship from when you're like 20 to when you're 30, and then you haven't really experienced other types of relationships, with this Sun placement, there's something there. There's something which you have to ask yourself, like, is this relationship really happy? Like, what is actually going on here? Are the two people in this relationship having freedom? You know, are we really able to live our lives? And, you know, if I see a Sun in seventh house person and they are single, I'm like, hey, you got something going on there, because you're not afraid to be alone. Like, we can't always be in a relationship. That's just not how life works, right? There can be a fear of loneliness that comes up. I've also noticed Sun in seventh house people that have never been in a relationship in their life, like in the early parts of their lives, like in their teens and their 20s, they've never really been in a relationship. And that somehow can also damage your self-confidence and self-esteem in a sense too, if you've never been in a relationship. That is really going to do something to that Sun in seventh house person. So find balance. be in relationships, learn to be out of it, maybe try a new relationship. When it's time to let it go, and then go back into being in another relationship. That's how life is. And when you're able to build a solid sense of yourself, like know what you want in your career, know what you want in your relationship, like know what kind of partner you actually want to be what kind of relationship you want to be in, what kind of partner you want to be with, and know everything else about you, independent of anybody else. Because when we're in a relationship, it's really hard for us to really know ourselves, like holistically, like really know ourselves, the independent parts of us. We're going to know a lot about our shadow self. We're going to know a lot about things that we want to suppress, but we're not going to really know the other parts of ourselves, our, things that we don't suppress. And I think there's also a gift with Sun in 7th house too, is to be able to learn about your shadow self through being in a relationship with another. That is the gift there. The challenge is to know the other side of the coin, which is a more obvious side of the coin, which you have to know by being by yourself. So it's all about balance. And when you can kind of find balance here, it's going to be really great, because you are going to make the best partners out there. They have Sun in 7th house. Some of the very creative people have Sun in 7th house. Like, you can be super romantic. You love to give gifts. You know exactly what the other person wants to do, wants to hear. And you can really give that to them from really a place of sincerity, right? Not from a place of manipulation, because you have already given yourself, you've nourished yourself enough that you are willing to give to another unconditionally. That's where you want to get to, because you can really give unconditionally in a very beautiful way. But you can't do that if you are in lack, if you are hungry, if you are not fed, if you're not nourished, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not loving yourself. You really can't do that for another. It will only be like, I'm giving to you and I want something back. So give to yourself first, and then be that amazing partner that everybody wants to be with, which is what you could be with Sun in 7th house. So, of course, things that I say here may change and may be morphed here and there depending on other things in your birth chart, especially aspects in your birth chart. So if you want to dive deeper into your birth chart, especially with aspects, then join me and our community on Patreon. I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. I would love to see you there. We are doing several series regarding astrology, human design, and the gene keys, including aspects in the birth chart and synastry and composite charts. Sun in the 8th house. This will be the last house for this video. All right. Gotta sigh a little bit there with Sun in the 8th house. This is a very complex placement to have the Sun being in, and I think the 7th house and the 8th house and the 6th house are 3 houses where the Sun just doesn't want to be in. It's very hard. I mean, I think the Sun even likes the 12th house more than the 8th house because of the ability to surrender. With the 12th house, the Sun doesn't like to be there, but the Sun's like, all right, whatever, I'm here. But the 8th house, it's a little bit harder of a house to surrender. So if you have Sun in the 8th house, you may have grown up, or you really have experienced the darker sides of life since you were very young, and you will continue to experience the darker sides of life throughout your life. The 8th house is about secrets and things that we want to hide and we don't want to share with other people. So Sun in the 8th house people have experienced a lot of darkness in life, but you don't really want to share that with just anybody. You're going to want to share that with people you're very close with, like your sexual partner, your intimate relationships. But other than that, you really don't want to share that with other people. But you want to know about them and their darkness. And sometimes Sun in the 8th house people will try to squeeze that out of you. And then that's when we get into the negative of Sun in the 8th house, is when they try to manipulate or squeeze out of you your psychological patterns and stuff like that, even when you're not ready for it. But they're not going to tell you anything about them. So it can be a little bit hard to be in a relationship with people who have Sun in the 8th house. Even in a close, intimate relationship, it can also still be very hard. Sun in the 8th house people have this way of attaching to someone or something, and they think that they've given everything, so therefore they're hoping that you're going to give as much in return, but actually they haven't given as much, if that kind of made sense. So they may think that they've given you a lot of time or a lot of energy, and so therefore you have to give them the same amount of time, money, A lot of it is money as well. Because 8th house rules like joint resources and joint finances. So they think that you have to give them money for what they're doing, but actually they haven't done as much or given as much. So what I have noticed, if you are the evolved version of Sun in the 8th house, is that you are the first to open up. You make the first move to really and honestly open up to yourself. And then open up to others. And that is when life gets easier for you. Don't try to take and take without actually giving or thinking that you have given, but you haven't. Because you need to be giving to yourself. And what you need to give to yourself is investment. Because the 8th house rules investment. Invest in your own therapy sessions. Invest in your own self-worth program. Invest in, getting an astrology reading for yourself. Just invest in all kinds of things for yourself. Invest in pleasurable things for yourself. Because the 8th house also is a house that rules sexuality and pleasure and sex and the pain and the pleasure of sex. So invest in things that makes your juices run, right? I would call it like that. Invest in that for yourself. Buy sexy lingerie for yourself. Figure out how you have an orgasm. What works for you when it comes to orgasm. Be open to yourself. Figure out, know your dark side. If I were to ask you, what is the worst, ugliest thing about you? What do you fear most in your life? What is it that you fear so badly that you have anxiety over and that you would do anything just to not have to face this fear? What is it? What is the nastiest, ugliest, cruel thing about you? If you can answer that question for yourself with honesty, without criticizing yourself, without shame, without guilt, then you are a golden Sun in the 8th house person. Because that is when you can really be there for people in a very real way. Because when you have Sun in the 8th house, you love crisis situations. You're very good with that. You're very good with psychology. You're very good with emergency types of life and death situations. You can be good with all of it. You don't have to pick and choose, right? You can be good with all of it. But, it's not just a physical emergency that you can be good in. It can be a psychological emergency, but you're not going to be good in either physical, psychological, emotional emergency in a very real way unless you're doing that with yourself. So if you are let's say, a psychologist, right, and you just get overwhelmed when you go into a session with a client, and you just feel exhausted or you're feeling dissatisfied, frustrated, you're criticizing things that happen in the world or in that session. Sometimes you're blaming things outside of yourself, right? That can be a negative expression of Sun in the 8th house. It's because you are not even able to handle your own darkness yet. That is why other people's darkness overwhelms you so effing much. But once you can handle your own shit, that is when you can handle anybody's shit. And we all need to have somebody with Sun in the 8th house in our lives because life isn't always easy. Life is filled with loss and death. One last thing that I want to mention with Sun in the 8th house people is that you will go through lots of rebirths in your life, and you have to be open to that, open to the cycles of death and rebirth in your life. I've noticed that if you have Sun in the 8th house and it's a mutable sign or a cardinal sign, you'll have an easier time with that. If it's in a fixed sign, so fixed signs are Scorpio, Taurus, Leo, and Aquarius, you'll have a harder time with that. The other signs have an easier time with death, cycles, and rebirth. Those fixed signs, the 4 signs, have a harder time with that. They may cling to old versions of themselves, cling to relationships that have already expired, cling to versions of themselves that have expired, cling to careers that have expired. Because, change comes with insecurities and change doesn't always feel safe. And safety and security is also very important for Sun in the 8th house people. They want security, safety financially, but they also want that change. They're a little bit like the Wheel of Fortune in the tarot card in a sense. You have to be able to allow the abundance no, abundance is not the right word. You have to be able to allow the fortunes to come to you, but yet let it go from time to time, right? So just keeping is not. So if you have a lot of money, you can't just keep that money, right? With Sun in the 8th house, for example, you have to invest that money and allow that money to grow. This is really important because this is a house of investment. Same with yourself. If you feel like you've healed, you've evolved in a certain way, don't just cling to that stage of your evolution. Allow yourself to continue to push yourself to invest and invest. The more that you're investing in yourself, the more that you'll see that you can always keep growing and evolving and reach that state of enlightenment. All right. So, like I said, with all these things that I've mentioned, there could be some modifications to it depending on planets in your chart and aspects that might be made to the sun. So I would highly recommend that you check out the aspects in your birth chart as well. And if you're interested to dive deeper into that, then join me and the community on our Patreon, where we are going through a lot of exclusive astrology series and also gene keys and human design, including going through the different aspects in your birth chart and in synastry and in composite charts. So I'll leave a link to that in the description box below, and I'll see you there. All right, well, that's it for today, beautiful souls. If you're interested in getting a reading from me or my soul sisters, then head to the link in the description box as well. It's called -soul.com. That's where you can find our reading services. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.